The Wonderful Visit by H.G. Wells. Read by Stuart Crank. To the memory of my dear friend, Walter Lowe. The Night of the Strange Bird. 1. On the night of the strange bird, many people at Sidderton, and some nearer, saw a glare on the Sidderford moor. But no one in Sidderford saw it, for most of Sidderford was abed. All day the wind had been rising, so that the larks on the moor chirruped fitfully near the ground, or rose only to be driven like leaves before the wind. The sun set in a bloody welter of clouds, and the moon was hidden. The glare, they say, was golden, like a beam shining out of the sky, not a uniform blaze, but broken all over by curving flashes like the waving of swords. It lasted but a moment, and left the night dark and obscure. There were letters about it in nature, and a rough drawing that no one thought very like. None in Sidderford saw the light, but Annie, Hooker Durgan's wife, was lying awake, and she saw the reflection of it, a flickering tongue of gold, dancing on the wall. She, too, was one of those who heard the sound. The others who heard the sound were Lumpy Durgan, the half-wit, and Amory's mother. They said it was a sound like children singing, and a throbbing of harp strings, carried on a rush of notes like that which sometimes comes from an organ. It began and ended like the opening and shutting of a door, and before and after they heard nothing but the night wind howling over the moor and the noise of the caves under Sidderford Cliff. Amory's mother said she wanted to cry when she heard it, but Lumpy was only sorry he could hear no more. That is as much as anyone can tell you of the glare upon Sidderford Moor and the alleged music therewith, and whether these had any real connection with the strange bird whose history follows is more than I can say. But I set it down here for reasons that will be more apparent as the story proceeds. The Coming of the Strange Bird. 2. Sandy Bright was coming down the road from Spinner's, carrying a side of bacon he had taken in exchange for a clock. He saw nothing of the light, but he heard and saw the strange bird. He suddenly heard a flapping and a voice like a woman wailing, and being a nervous man and all alone, he was alarmed forthwith, and turning, all a-tremble, saw something large and black against the dim darkness of the cedars up the hill. It seemed to be coming right down upon him, and incontinently he dropped his bacon and set off running, only to fall headlong. He tried in vain, such was his state of mind, to remember the beginning of the Lord's Prayer. The strange bird flapped over him, something larger than himself, with a vast spread of wings, and, as he thought, black. He screamed, and gave himself up for lost. Then it went past him, sailing down the hill and, soaring over the vicarage, vanished into the hazy valley towards Sidderford. And Sandy Bright lay upon his stomach there for ever so long, staring into the darkness after the strange bird. At last he got upon his knees and began to thank heaven for his merciful deliverance, with his eyes downhill. He went on down into the village, talking aloud and confessing his sins as he went, lest the strange bird should come back. All who heard him thought him drunk, but from that night he was a changed man, and had done with drunkenness and defrauding the revenue by selling silver ornaments without a licence. And the side of bacon lay upon the hillside until the tallyman from Port Burdock found it in the morning. The next who saw the strange bird was a solicitor's clerk at Ipping Hanger, who was climbing the hill before breakfast to see the sunrise. Save for a few dissolving wisps of cloud, the sky had been blown clear in the night. At first he thought it was an eagle he saw. It was near the zenith and incredibly remote, a mere bright speck above the pink cirri, and it seemed as if it fluttered and beat itself against the sky, as an imprisoned swallow might do against a window pane. Then down it came into the shadow of the earth, sweeping in a great curve towards Port Burdock, and round over the hangar, and so vanishing behind the woods of Siddermorton Park. It seemed larger than a man. Just before it was hidden, the light of the rising sun smote over the edge of the downs and touched its wings, and they flashed with the brightness of flames and the colour of precious stones, and so passed, leaving the witness agape. A ploughman, going to his work along under the stone wall of Siddermorton Park, saw the strange bird flash over him for a moment, and vanish among the hazy interstices of the beech trees. But he saw little of the colour of the wings, witnessing only that its legs, which were long, seemed pink and bare like naked flesh, and its body mottled white. It smote like an arrow through the air and was gone. These were the first 3 eyewitnesses of the strange bird. Now, in these days, one does not cower before the devil and one's own sinfulness, or see strange iridescent wings in the light of dawn, and say nothing of it afterwards. The young solicitor's clerk told his mother and sisters at breakfast, and, afterwards, on his way to the office at Port Burdock, spoke of it to the blacksmith of Hammerpond, and spent the morning with his fellow clerks, marvelling instead of copying deeds. And Sandy Bright went to talk the matter over with Mr. Jekyll, the primitive minister, and the ploughman told old Hugh, and afterwards the vicar of Siddermorton.
"They are not an imaginative race about here,"
said the vicar of Siddermorton.
"I wonder how much of that was true. Barring that it thinks the wings were brown, it sounds uncommonly like a flamingo."
The hunting of the strange bird. 3. The vicar of Siddermorton, which is 9 miles inland from Siddermouth, as the crow flies, was an ornithologist. Some such pursuit, botany, antiquity, of folklore, is almost inevitable for a single man in his position. He was given to geometry also, propounding occasionally impossible problems in the educational times, but ornithology was his forte. He had already added 2 visitors to the list of occasional British birds. His name was well known in the columns of the Zoologist. I am afraid it may be forgotten by now, for the world moves apace. And on the day after the coming of the strange bird, came first one and then another to confirm the ploughman's story, and tell him, not that it had any connection, of the glare upon Sidderford Moor. Now, the vicar of Siddermorton had 2 rivals in his scientific pursuits. Gully of Sidderton, who had actually seen the glare, and who it was sent the drawing to nature, and Borland, the natural history dealer, who kept the marine laboratory at Port Burdock. Borland, the vicar thought, should have stuck to his copepods, but instead he kept a taxidermist, and took advantage of his littoral position to pick up rare seabirds. It was evident to anyone who knew anything of collecting that both these men would be scouring the country after the strange visitant, before 24 hours were out. The vicar's eye rested on the back of Saunders' British Birds, for he was in his study at the time. Already in 2 places there was entered. The only known British specimen was secured by the Reverend K. Hillier, vicar of Siddermorton. A 3rd such entry. He doubted if any other collector had that. He looked at his watch. 2. He had just lunched, and usually he rested in the afternoon. He knew it would make him feel very disagreeable if he went out into the hot sunshine, both on the top of his head and generally. Yet Gully perhaps was out, prowling, observant. Suppose it was something very good. and Gully got it. His gun stood in the corner. The thing had iridescent wings and pink legs. The chromatic conflict was certainly exceedingly stimulating. He took his gun. He would have gone out by the glass doors and veranda and down the garden into the hill road in order to avoid his housekeeper's eye. He knew his gun expeditions were not approved of. But advancing towards him up the garden, he saw the curate's wife and her 2 daughters carrying tennis rackets. His curate's wife was a young woman of immense will, who used to play tennis on his lawn and cut his roses, differ from him on doctrinal points, and criticise his personal behaviour all over the parish. He went in abject fear of her, was always trying to propitiate her, but so far he had clung to his ornithology. However, he went out by the front door. 4. If it were not for collectors, England would be full, so to speak, of rare birds and wonderful butterflies, strange flowers and 1,000 interesting things. But happily the collector prevents all that, either killing with his own hands or buying extravagantly, procuring people of the lower classes to kill such eccentricities as appear. It makes work for people, even though Acts of Parliament interfere. In this way, for instance, he is killing off the chough in Cornwall, the bath-white butterfly, the Queen of Spain fritillary, and can plume himself upon the extermination of the great auk, and 100 other rare birds and plants and insects. All that is the work of the collector, and his glory alone. In the name of science. And this is right, and as it should be. Eccentricity, in fact, is immorality. Think over it again if you do not think so now, just as eccentricity in one's way of thinking is madness. I defy you to find another definition that will fit all the cases of either. And if a species is rare, it follows that it is not fitted to survive. The collector is, after all, merely like the foot soldier in the days of heavy armour. He leaves the combatants alone and cuts the throats of those who are overthrown. So one may go through England from end to end in the summertime and see only 8 or 10 commonplace wild flowers and the commoner butterflies, and a dozen or so common birds, and never be offended by any breach of the monotony, any splash of strange blossom or flutter of unknown wing. All the rest have been collected years ago, for which cause we should all love collectors, and bear in mind what we owe them when their little collections are displayed. These camphorated little drawers of theirs, their glass cases and blotting paper books, are the graves of the rare and the beautiful, the symbols of the triumph of leisure, morally spent, over the delights of life. All of which, as you very properly remark, has nothing whatever to do with the strange bird. 5. There is a place on the moor where the black water shines among the succulent moss, and the hairy sundew, eater of careless insects, spreads its red-stained, hungry hands to the god who gives his creatures, one to feed another. On a ridge thereby grow birches with a silvery bark, and the soft green of the larch mingles with the dark green fir. Thither, through the honey-humming heather, came the vicar, in the heat of the day, carrying a gun under his arm, a gun loaded with swan shot for the strange bird. And over his disengaged hand he carried a pocket handkerchief, wherewith, ever and again, he wiped his beady face. He went by and on past the big pond and the pool full of brown leaves where the Sidder arises, and so by the road, which is at first sandy and then chalky, to the little gate that goes into the park. There are 7 steps up to the gate, and on the further side 6 down again, lest the deer escape, so that when the vicar stood in the gateway, his head was 10 feet or more above the ground. And looking where a tumult of bracken fronds filled the hollow between 2 groups of beech, his eye caught something party-coloured that wavered and went. Suddenly, his face gleamed, and his muscles grew tense. He ducked his head, clutched his gun with both hands, and stood still. Then, watching keenly, he came on down the steps into the park, and still holding his gun in both hands, crept rather than walked towards the jungle of bracken. Nothing stirred, and he almost feared that his eyes had played him false, until he reached the ferns and had gone rustling breast-high into them. Then suddenly rose something full of wavering colours, 20 yards or less in front of his face, and beating the air. In another moment it had fluttered above the bracken and spread its pinions wide. He saw what it was. His heart was in his mouth, and he fired out of pure surprise and habit. There was a scream of superhuman agony. The wings beat the air twice, and the victim came slanting swiftly downward and struck the ground. A struggling heap of writhing body, broken wing and flying blood-stained plumes upon the turfy slope behind. The vicar stood, aghast, with his smoking gun in his hand. It was no bird at all, but a youth with an extremely beautiful face, clad in a robe of saffron and with iridescent wings, across whose pinions great waves of colour, flushes of purple and crimson, golden green and intense blue, pursued one another as he writhed in his agony. Never had the vicar seen such gorgeous floods of colour, not stained glass windows, not the wings of butterflies, not even the glories of crystals seen between prisms. No colours on earth could compare with them. Twice, the angel raised himself, only to fall over sideways again. Then the beating of the wings diminished. The terrified face grew pale. The floods of colour abated, and suddenly, with a sob, he lay prone, and the changing hues of the broken wings faded swiftly into one uniform, dull grey hue. "Oh, what has happened to me?" cried the angel, for such it was, shuddering violently, hands outstretched and clutching the ground, and then lying still.
"Dear me," said the vicar. I had no idea."
He came forward cautiously.
"Excuse me," he said. "I am afraid I have shocked you."
It was the obvious remark. The angel seemed to become aware of his presence for the first time. He raised himself by one hand. His brown eyes stared into the vicar's. Then, with a gasp, and biting his nether lip, he struggled into a sitting position, and surveyed the vicar from top to toe. "A man," said the angel, clasping his forehead. "A man, in the maddest black clothes, and without a feather upon him. Then I was not deceived. I am indeed in the land of dreams." The Vicar and the Angel. 6. Now, there are some things frankly impossible. The weakest intellect will admit this situation is impossible. The Athenaeum will probably say as much, should it venture to review this. Sun-bespattered ferns, spreading beech trees, the vicar and the gun are acceptable enough. But this angel is a different matter. Plain, sensible people will scarcely go on with such an extravagant book, and the vicar fully appreciated this impossibility. But he lacked decision. Consequently, he went on with it, as you shall immediately hear. He was hot. It was after dinner. He was in no mood for mental subtleties. The angel had him at a disadvantage, and further distracted him from the main issue by irrelevant iridescence and a violent fluttering. For the moment, it never occurred to the vicar to ask whether the angel was possible or not. He accepted him in the confusion of the moment, and the mischief was done. Put yourself in his place, my dear Athenium. You go out shooting, you hit something, that alone would disconcert you. You find you have hit an angel, and he writhes about for a minute, and then sits up and addresses you. He makes no apology for his own impossibility. Indeed, he carries the charge clean into your camp. A man, he says, pointing. A man, in the maddest black clothes and without a feather upon him. Then I was not deceived. I am indeed in the land of dreams. You must answer him, unless you take to your heels, or blow his brains out with your second barrel as an escape from the controversy.
The land of dreams? Pardon me, if I suggest you have just come out of it, was the vicar's remark.
How can that be? Said the angel.
Your wing, said the vicar, is bleeding. Before we talk, may I have the pleasure, the melancholy pleasure, of tying it up? I am really most sincerely sorry.
The angel put his hand behind his back and winced. The vicar assisted his victim to stand up. The angel turned gravely, and the vicar, with numberless, insignificant, panting parentheses, carefully examined the injured wings. They articulated, he observed with interest, to a kind of second glenoid on the outer and upper edge of the shoulder blade. The left wing had suffered little, except the loss of some of the primary wing quills, and a shot or so in the ala spuria. But the humerus bone of the right was evidently smashed. The vicar stanched the bleeding as well as he could, and tied up the bone with his pocket handkerchief, and the neck wrap his housekeeper made him carry in all weathers.
I am afraid you will not be able to fly for some time, said he, feeling the bone.
I don't like this new sensation, said the angel.
The pain when I feel your bone?
The what? Said the angel.
The pain.
Pain, you call it? No, I certainly don't like the pain. Do you have much of this pain in the land of dreams?
A very fair share, said the vicar. Is it new to you?
Quite, said the angel. I don't like it.
How curious, said the vicar,
and bit at the end of a strip of linen to tie a knot.
I think this bandaging must serve for the present, he said. I've studied ambulance work before, but never the bandaging up of wing wounds. Is your pain any better?
It glows now, instead of flashing, said the angel.
I'm afraid you will find it glow for some time, said the vicar,
still intent on the wound. The angel gave a shrug of the wing and turned round to look at the vicar again. He had been trying to keep an eye on the vicar over his shoulder during all their interview. He looked at him from top to toe with raised eyebrows and a growing smile on his beautiful, soft-featured face. It seems so odd, he said with a sweet little laugh, to be talking to a man.
Do you know, said the vicar, now that I come to think of it, it is equally odd to me that I should be talking to an angel. I am a somewhat matter-of-fact person. A vicar has to be. Angels I have always regarded as artistic conceptions.
Exactly what we think of men.
But surely you have seen so many men.
Never before today. In pictures and books, times enough, of course. But I have seen several since the sunrise. Solid, real men. Besides a horse or so. Those unicorn things, you know, without horns. And quite a number of those grotesque, knobby things called cows. I was naturally a little frightened at so many mythical monsters, and came to hide here until it was dark. I suppose it will be dark again presently, like it was at first. Phew! This pain of yours is poor fun. I hope I shall wake up directly."
"I don't understand, quite,"
said the vicar, knitting his brows and tapping his forehead with his flat hand.
"Mythical monster?"
The worst thing he had been called for years hitherto was a medieval anachronism by an advocate of disestablishment.
"Do I understand that you consider me as something in a dream?"
"Of course," said the angel, smiling.
"And this world about me, these rugged trees and spreading fronds—"
"Is all so very dreamlike," said the angel. "Just exactly what one dreams of, or artists imagine."
"You have artists, then, among the angels?"
"All kinds of artists. Angels with wonderful imaginations, who invent men and cows and eagles and 1,000 impossible creatures."
"Impossible creatures?" said the vicar.
"Impossible creatures," said the angel. "Myths."
"But I'm real," said the vicar. "I assure you, I'm real."
The angel shrugged his wings and winced and smiled. "I can always tell when I am dreaming," he said.
"You dreaming?" said the vicar.
He looked round him.
"You dreaming?"
he repeated. His mind worked diffusely. He held out his hand with all his fingers moving.
"I have it," he said. "I begin to see."
A really brilliant idea was dawning upon his mind. He had not studied mathematics at Cambridge for nothing, after all.
"Tell me, please, some animals of your world, of the real world, real animals, you know."
"Real animals?" said the angel, smiling. "Why, there's griffins, and dragons, and jabberwocks, and cherubim, and sphinxes, and the hippogriff, and mermaids, and satyrs, and—"
"Thank you,"
said the vicar, as the angel appeared to be warming to his work.
"Thank you. That is quite enough. I begin to understand."
He paused for a moment, his face pursed up.
"Yes, I begin to see it."
"See what?" asked the angel.
"The griffins and satyrs and so forth. It's as clear—"
"I don't see them," said the angel.
"No, the whole point is they are not to be seen in this world. But our men with imaginations have told us all about them, you know. And even I, at times. There are places in this village where you must simply take what they set before you, or give offence. I say, have seen in my dreams jabberwocks, bogle brutes, mandrakes. From our point of view, you know, they are dream creatures."
"Dream creatures?" said the angel. "How singular! This is a very curious dream, a kind of topsy-turvy one. You call men real, and angels a myth. It almost makes one think that in some odd way there must be two worlds, as it were."
"At least two," said the vicar.
"Lying somewhere close together, and yet scarcely suspecting—"
"As near as page to page of a book."
"Penetrating each other, living each its own life. This is really a delicious dream."
"And never dreaming of each other."
"Except when people go a-dreaming." "Yes," said the angel thoughtfully. "It must be something of the sort. And that reminds me. Sometimes, when I have been dropping asleep or drowsing under the noontide sun, I have seen strange corrugated faces just like yours going by me, and trees with green leaves upon them, and such queer, uneven ground as this. It must be so. I have fallen into another world."
"Sometimes," began the vicar, "at bedtime, when I have been just on the edge of consciousness, I have seen faces as beautiful as yours, and the strange, dazzling vistas of a wonderful scene that flowed past me, winged shapes soaring over it, and wonderful, sometimes terrible forms going to and fro. I've even heard sweet music, too, in my ears. It may be that as we withdraw our attention from the world of sense, the pressing world about us, as we pass into the twilight of repose, other worlds, just as we see the stars, those other worlds in space, when the glare of day recedes, and the artistic dreamers who see such things most clearly—"
They looked at one another. "And in some incomprehensible manner, I have fallen into this world of yours out of my own," said the angel. "Into the world of my dreams, grown real." He looked about him. "Into the world of my dreams."
"It is confusing," said the vicar. "It almost makes one think there may be 4 dimensions after all. In which case, of course," he went on hurriedly,
for he loved geometrical speculations and took a certain pride in his knowledge of them,
"there may be any number of 3-dimensional universes packed side by side, and all dimly dreaming of one another. There may be world upon world, universe upon universe. It's perfectly possible. There's nothing so incredible as the absolutely possible. But I wonder how you came to fall out of your world into mine."
"Dear me," said the angel. "There's deer and a stag, just as they draw them on the coats of arms. How grotesque it all seems. Can I really be awake?" He rubbed his knuckles into his eyes. The half-dozen of dappled deer came in Indian file obliquely through the trees, and halted, watching. "It's no dream. I am, really, a solid concrete angel, in dreamland," said the angel. He laughed. The vicar stood, surveying him. The reverend gentleman was pulling his mouth askew after a habit he had, and slowly stroking his chin. He was asking himself whether he, too, was not in the land of dreams. 7. Now, in the land of the angels, so the vicar learnt in the course of many conversations, there is neither pain, nor trouble, nor death, marrying nor giving in marriage, birth nor forgetting. Only at times new things begin. It is a land without hill or dale, a wonderfully level land, glittering with strange buildings, with incessant sunlight or full moon, and with incessant breezes blowing through the aeolian traceries of the trees. It is Wonderland, with glittering seas hanging in the sky, across which strange fleets go sailing, none know whither. There the flowers glow in heaven, and the stars shine about one's feet, and the breath of life is a delight. The land goes on forever. There is no solar system, nor interstellar space, such as there is in our universe, and the air goes upward past the sun into the uttermost abyss of their sky. And there is nothing but beauty there. All the beauty in our art is but feeble rendering of faint glimpses of that wonderful world. and our composers, our original composers, are those who hear, however faintly, the dust of melody that drives before its winds. And the angels and wonderful monsters of bronze and marble and living fire go to and fro therein. It is a land of law, for whatever is under the law, but its laws all, in some strange way, differ from ours. Their geometry is different, because their space has a curve in it, so that all their planes are cylinders. And their law of gravitation is not according to the law of inverse squares, and there are 24 primary colours instead of only 3. Most of the fantastic things of our science are commonplaces there, and all our earthly science would seem to them the maddest dreaming. There are no flowers upon their plants, for instance, but jets of coloured fire. That, of course, will seem mere nonsense to you because you do not understand most of what the angel told the vicar. Indeed, the vicar could not realise, because his own experiences, being only of this world of matter, warred against his understanding. It was too strange to imagine. What had jolted these twin universes together so that the angel had fallen suddenly into Sidderford, neither the angel nor the vicar could tell. Nor, for the matter of that, could the author of this story. The author is concerned with the facts of the case, and has neither the desire nor the confidence to explain them. Explanations are the fallacy of a scientific age, and the cardinal fact of the case is this: that out in Siddermorton Park, with the glory of some wonderful world where there is neither sorrow nor sighting, still clinging to him on the 4th of August, 1895, stood an angel, bright and beautiful, talking to the vicar of Siddermorton about the plurality of worlds. The author will swear to the angel, if need be, and there he draws the line. 8. "I have," said the angel, "a most unusual feeling here. Have had since sunrise. I don't remember ever having any feeling here before." "Not pain, I hope," said the vicar. No, it is quite different from that. A kind of vacuous feeling." "The atmospheric pressure, perhaps, is a little different," the vicar began, feeling his chin. "And do you know, I have also the most curious sensations in my mouth, almost as if... it's so absurd. As if I wanted to stuff things into it." "Bless me," said the vicar. "Of course, you're hungry." "Hungry?" said the angel. "What's that?" "Don't you eat?" "Eat? The word's quite new to me." "Put food into your mouth, you know. One has to, here. You will soon learn. If you don't, you get thin and miserable, and suffer a great deal pain, you know. And finally, you die." "Die?" said the angel. "That's another strange word." "It's not strange here. It means leaving off, you know," said the vicar. "We never leave off," said the angel. "You don't know what may happen to you in this world," said the vicar, thinking him over. "Possibly, if you are feeling hungry, and can feel pain, and have your wings broken, you may even have to die before you get out of it again. At any rate, you had better try eating. For my own part, there are many more disagreeable things." "I suppose I had better eat," said the angel. "If it's not too difficult. I don't like this pain of yours, and I don't like this hungry. If your die is anything like it, I would prefer to eat. What a very odd world this is.
To die, said the vicar, is generally considered worse than either pain or hunger. It depends.
You must explain all that to me later, said the angel. Unless I wake up. At present, please show me how to eat, if you will. I feel a kind of urgency.
Pardon me,
said the vicar, and offered an elbow.
If I may have the pleasure of entertaining you, my house lies yonder, not a couple of miles from here.
Your house, said the angel, a little puzzled, but he took the vicar's arm affectionately, and the two, conversing as they went, waded slowly through the luxuriant bracken, sun-mottled under the trees, and on over the stile in the park palings, and so across the bee-swarming heather for a mile or more, down the hillside, home. You would have been charmed at the couple could you have seen them. The angel, slight of figure, scarcely 5 feet high, and with a beautiful, almost effeminate face, such as an Italian old master might have painted. Indeed, there is one in the National Gallery, Tobias in the Angel by some artist unknown, not at all unlike him so far as face and spirit go. He was robed simply in a purple-wrought saffron blouse, bare-kneed and bare-footed, with his wings, broken now and a leaden grey, folded behind him. The vicar was a short, rather stout figure, rubicund, red-haired, clean-shaven, and with bright, ruddy brown eyes. He wore a piebald straw hat with a black ribbon, a very neat white tie, and a fine gold watch chain. He was so greatly interested in his companion that it only occurred to him when he was in sight of the vicarage that he had left his gun lying just where he had dropped it amongst the bracken. He was rejoiced to hear that the pain of the bandaged wing fell rapidly in intensity. Parenthesis on angels. 9. Let us be plain. The angel of this story is the angel of art, not the angel that one must be irreverent to touch, neither the angel of religious feeling nor the angel of popular belief. The last we all know. She is alone among the angelic hosts in being distinctly feminine. She wears a robe of immaculate, unmitigated white with sleeves, is fair, with long golden tresses, and has eyes of the blue of heaven. Just a pure woman she is, pure maiden or pure matron in her robe de nuit, and with wings attached to her shoulder blades. Her callings are domestic and sympathetic. She watches over a cradle or assists a sister soul heavenward. Often she bears a palm leaf, but one would not be surprised if one met her carrying a warming pan softly to some poor, chilly sinner. She it was who came down in a bevy to Marguerite in prison, in the amended last scene in Faust at the Lyceum, and the interesting and improving little children that are to die young have visions of such angels in the novels of Mrs. Henry Wood. This white womanliness, with her indescribable charm of lavender-like holiness, her aroma of clean, methodical lives, is, it would seem after all, a purely Teutonic invention. Latin thought knows her not. The old masters have none of her. She is of a piece with that gentle, innocent, ladylike school of art, whereof the greatest triumph is a lump in one's throat, and where wit and passion, scorn and pomp have no place. The White Angel was made in Germany, in the land of blonde women and the domestic sentiments. She comes to us cool and worshipful, pure and tranquil, as silently soothing as the breadth and calmness of the starlit sky, which also is so unspeakably dear to the Teutonic soul. We do her reverence. And to the angels of the Hebrews, those spirits of power and mystery, to Raphael, Zadkiel, and Michael, of whom only Watts has caught the shadow, of whom only Blake has seen the splendour. To them too do we do reverence. But this angel the vicar shot is, we say, no such angel at all, but the angel of Italian art, polychromatic and gay. He comes from the land of beautiful dreams, and not from any holier place. At best, he is a popish creature. Bear patiently, therefore, with his scattered remedies, and be not hasty with your charge of irreverence before the story is read. At the vicarage. 10. The curate's wife and her 2 daughters and Mrs. Jehoram were still playing at tennis on the lawn behind the vicar's study, playing keenly and talking in gasps about paper patterns for blouses. But the vicar forgot and came in that way. They saw the vicar's hat above the rhododendrons, and a bare, curly head beside him. "I must ask him about Susan Wigan," said the curate's wife. She was about to swerve, and stood with a racket in one hand and a ball between the fingers of the other. "He really ought to have gone to see her, being the vicar. Not George, For the 2 figures suddenly turned the corner, and were visible. The vicar, arm in arm with... You see, it came on the curate's wife suddenly. The angel's face being towards her, she saw nothing of the wings, only a face of unearthly beauty in a halo of chestnut hair, and a graceful figure clothed in a saffron garment that barely reached the knees. The thought of those knees flashed upon the vicar at once. He too was horror-struck. So were the 2 girls, and Mrs. Jehoram, all horror-struck. The angel stared in astonishment at the horror-struck group. You see, he had never seen anyone horror-struck before. "Mr. Hillier," said the curate's wife, "this is too much." She stood, speechless for a moment. "Oh!" She swept round upon the rigid girls. "Come." The vicar opened and shut his voiceless mouth. The world hummed and spun about him. There was a whirling of zephyr skirts, 4 impassioned faces sweeping towards the open door of the passage that ran through the vicarage. He felt his position went with them. "Mrs. Mendham," said the vicar, stepping forward. "Mrs. Mendham, you don't understand." "Oh!" they all said again. 1, 2, 3, 4 skirts vanished in the doorway. The vicar staggered halfway across the lawn and stopped, aghast. "This comes," he heard the curate's wife say, out of the depth of the passage, "of having an unmarried vicar." The umbrella stand wobbled. The front door of the vicarage slammed like a minute gun. There was silence for a space. "I might have thought," he said. "She is always so hasty." He put his hand to his chin, a habit with him, then turned his face to his companion. The angel was evidently well-bred. He was holding up Mrs. Jehoram's sunshade. She had left it on one of the cane chairs, and examining it with extraordinary interest. He opened it. "What a curious little mechanism," he said. "What can it be for?" The vicar did not answer. The angelic costume certainly was. The vicar knew it was a case for a French phrase, but he could scarcely remember it. He so rarely used French. It was not de trop, he knew. Anything but de trop. The angel was de trop, but certainly not his costume. Sans culotte. The vicar examined his visitor critically, for the first time. "He will be difficult to explain," he said to himself, softly. The angel stuck the sunshade into the turf and went to smell the sweet briar. The sunshine fell upon his brown hair and gave it almost the appearance of a halo. He pricked his finger Odd, he said. Pain, again.
Yes, said the vicar, thinking aloud. He's very beautiful and curious as he is. I should like him best so, but I am afraid I must.
He approached the angel with a nervous cough. 11.
Those, said the vicar, were ladies.
How grotesque, said the angel, smiling and smelling the sweet briar. And such quaint shapes.
Possibly, said the vicar. Did you notice how they behaved?
They went away. Seemed, indeed, to run away. Frightened? I, of course, was frightened at things without wings. I hope they were not frightened at my wings.
At your appearance generally,
said the vicar, glancing involuntarily at the pink feet. Dear me, it never occurred to me. I suppose I seemed as odd to them as you did to me. He glanced down. And my feet. You have hooves, like a hippogriff.
Boots, corrected the vicar.
Boots, you call them. But anyhow, I am sorry I alarmed.
You see, said the vicar, stroking his chin, our ladies have peculiar views, rather inartistic views, about clothing. Dressed as you are, I am really afraid that, beautiful as your costume certainly is, you will find yourself somewhat isolated in society. We have a little proverb. When in Rome, one must do as the Romans do. I can assure you that, assuming you are desirous to associate with us during your involuntary stay.
The angel retreated a step or so as the vicar came nearer and nearer in his attempt to be diplomatic and confidential. The beautiful face grew perplexed. I don't quite understand. Why do you keep making these noises in your throat? Is it die, or eat, or any of those—
As your host,
interrupted the vicar, and stopped. As my host? Said the angel.
Would you object, pending more permanent arrangements, to invest yourself in a suit? An entirely new suit, I may say, like this I have on.
Oh, said the angel. He retreated so as to take in the vicar from top to toe. Wear clothes? Like yours? He said. He was puzzled, but amused. His eyes grew round and bright. His mouth puckered at the corners. Delightful, he said, clapping his hands together. What a mad, quaint dream this is! Where are they? He caught at the neck of the saffron robe.
Indoors, said the vicar. This way. We will change indoors.
12. So the angel was invested in a pair of nether garments of the vicar's, a shirt ripped down the back to accommodate the wings, socks, shoes, the vicar's dress shoes, collar, tie, and light overcoat. But putting on the latter was painful, and reminded the vicar that the bandaging was temporary. I will ring for tea at once, and send Grummet down for Crump, said the vicar. And dinner shall be earlier. While the vicar shouted his orders on the landing rails, the angel surveyed himself in the cheval glass with immense delight. If he was a stranger to pain, he was evidently no stranger, thanks perhaps to dreaming, to the pleasure of incongruity. They had tea in the drawing-room. The angel sat on the music stool. music stool because of his wings. At first he wanted to lie on the hearthrug. He looked much less radiant in the vicar's clothes than he had done upon the moor when dressed in saffron. His face shone still, the colour of his hair and cheeks was strangely bright, and there was a superhuman light in his eyes. But his wings, under the overcoat, gave him the appearance of a hunchback. The garments, indeed, made quite a terrestrial thing of him. The trousers were puckered transversely, and the shoes a size or so too large. He was charmingly affable, and quite ignorant of the most elementary facts of civilization. Eating came without much difficulty, and the vicar had an entertaining time teaching him how to take tea. What a mess it is! What a dear, grotesque, ugly world you live in, said the angel. Fancy stuffing things into your mouth. We use our mouths just to talk and sing with. Our world, you know, is almost incurably beautiful. We get so very little ugliness that I find all this delightful. Mrs. Hinniger, the vicar's housekeeper, looked at the angel suspiciously when she brought in the tea. She thought him rather a queer customer. What she would have thought had she seen him in saffron, no one can tell. The angel shuffled about the room, with his cup of tea in one hand and the bread and butter in the other, and examined the vicar's furniture. Outside the French windows, the lawn, with its array of dahlias and sunflowers, glowed in the warm sunlight, and Mrs. Jehoram's sunshade stood thereon like a triangle of fire. He thought the vicar's portrait over the mantel very curious indeed, but could not understand what it was there for. You have yourself round, he said, apropos of the portrait. Why want yourself flat? And he was vastly amused at the glass fire screen. He found the oak chairs odd. You're not square, are you? He said, when the vicar explained their use. We never double ourselves up. We lie about on the asphodel when we want to rest. The chair, said the vicar, to tell you the truth, has always puzzled me. It dates, I think, from the days when the floors were cold and very dirty. I suppose we have kept up the habit. It's become a kind of instinct with us to sit on chairs. Anyhow, if I went to see one of my parishioners and suddenly spread myself out on the floor, the natural way of it, I don't know what she would do. It would be all over the parish in no time. Yet it seems the natural method of reposing to recline. The Greeks and Romans. What is this? Said the angel abruptly. That's a stuffed kingfisher. I killed it. Killed it? Shot it, said the vicar. With a gun. Shot? As you did me? I didn't kill you, you see, fortunately. Is killing making like that? In a way. Dear me. And you wanted to make me like that? Wanted to put glass eyes in me and string me up in a glass case full of ugly green and brown stuff? You see, began the vicar, I scarcely understood. Is that die? Asked the angel suddenly. That is dead. It died. Poor little thing. I must eat a lot. But you say you killed it. Why? You see, said the vicar, I take an interest in birds, and I collect them. I wanted the specimen. The angel stared at him for a moment with puzzled eyes. A beautiful bird like that, he said with a shiver. Because the fancy took you. You wanted the specimen. He thought for a minute. Do you often kill? He asked the vicar. The Man of Science. 13. Then Dr. Crump arrived. Grummet had met him not 100 yards from the vicarage gate. He was a large, rather heavy-looking man, with a clean-shaven face and a double chin. He was dressed in a grey morning coat — he always affected grey — with a checkered black and white tie. "What's the trouble?" he said, entering and staring without a shadow of surprise at the angel's radiant face. "This gentleman," said the vicar, "or angel," the angel bowed, "is suffering from a gunshot wound." "Gunshot wound?" said Dr. Crump. "In July? May I look at it? Mr. Angel, I think you said?" "He will probably be able to assuage your pain," said the vicar. "Let me assist you to remove your coat." The angel turned obediently. "Spinal curvature," muttered Dr. Crump, quite audibly, walking round behind the angel. "No, abnormal growth. Hello, this is odd." He clutched the left wing. "Curious," he said. "Reduplication of the anterior limb. Bifid coracoid. Possible, of course, but I've never seen it before." The angel winced under his hands. "Humerus, radius, and ulnar. All there. Congenital, of course. Humerus broken. Curious integumentary simulation of feathers. Oh, dear me. Almost avian. Probably of considerable interest in comparative anatomy. I never did. How did this gunshot happen, Mr. Angel?" The vicar was amazed at the doctor's matter-of-fact manner. "Our friend," said the angel, moving his head at the vicar. "Unhappily, it is my doing," said the vicar, stepping forward, explanatory. "I mistook the gentleman, the angel, for a large bird." "Mistook him for a large bird? What next? Your eyes want seeing to," said Dr. Crump. "I've told you so before." He went on patting and feeling, keeping time with a series of grunts and inarticulate mutterings. "But this is really a very good bit of amateur bandaging," said he. "I think I shall leave it. Curious malformation this is. Don't you find it inconvenient, Mr. Angel?" He suddenly walked round so as to look in the angel's face. The angel thought he referred to the wound. "It is, rather," he said. "If it wasn't for the bones, I should say paint with iodine night and morning. Nothing like iodine. You could paint your face flat with it. But the osseous outgrowth, the bones, you know, complicate things. I could saw them off, of course. It's not a thing one should have done in a hurry." "Do you mean my wings?" said the angel, in alarm. "Wings?" said the doctor. "Eh? Call 'em wings. Yes. What else should I mean?" "Saw them off," said the angel. "Don't you think so? It's of course your affair. I am only advising." "Saw them off? What a funny creature you are," said the angel, beginning to laugh. "As you will," said the doctor. He detested people who laughed. "The things are curious," he said, turning to the vicar. "If inconvenient," to the angel. "I never heard of such complete reduplication before, at least among animals.
In plants it's common enough. Were you the only one in your family?"
He did not wait for a reply.
"Partial cases of the fission of limbs are not at all uncommon, of course, Vicar. 6-fingered children, calves with 6 feet, and cats with double toes, you know. May I assist you?"
he said, turning to the angel who was struggling with the coat.
"But such a complete reduplication, and so avian, too. It would be much less remarkable if it was simply another pair of arms."
The coat was got on, and he and the angel stared at one another.
"Really," said the doctor, "one begins to understand how that beautiful myth of the angels arose. You look a little hectic, Mr. Angel, feverish. Excessive brilliance is almost worse as a symptom than excessive pallor. Curious your name should be Angel. I must send you a cooling draught, if you should feel thirsty in the night."
He made a memorandum on his shirt cuff. The angel watched him thoughtfully, with the dawn of a smile in his eyes.
"1 minute, Crump," said the vicar,
taking the doctor's arm and leading him towards the door. The angel's smile grew brighter. He looked down at his black-clad legs. "He positively thinks I am a man," said the angel. "What he makes of the wings beats me altogether. What a queer creature he must be. This is really a most extraordinary dream." 14.
"That is an angel," whispered the vicar. "You don't understand."
"What?" said the doctor in a quick, sharp voice. His eyebrows went up, and he smiled.
"But the wings—"
"Quite natural, quite, if a little abnormal."
"Are you sure they are natural?"
"My dear fellow, everything that is natural. There is nothing unnatural in the world. If I thought there was, I should give up practice and go into La Grande Chartreuse. There are abnormal phenomena, of course, and—"
"But the way I came upon him," said the vicar.
"Yes, tell me where you picked him up," said the doctor. He sat down on the hall table. The vicar began rather hesitatingly. He was not very good at storytelling, with the rumours of a strange, great bird. He told the story in clumsy sentences, for, knowing the bishop as he did, with that awful example always before him, he dreaded getting his pulpit style into his daily conversation, and at every third sentence or so, the doctor made a downward movement of his head. The corners of his mouth tucked away, so to speak, as though he ticked off the phases of the story and so far found it just as it ought to be.
"Self-hypnotism," he murmured once.
"I beg your pardon," said the vicar.
"Nothing," said the doctor. "Nothing, I assure you. Go on. This is extremely interesting."
The vicar told him he went out with his gun.
"After lunch, I think you said?" interrupted the doctor.
"Immediately after," said the vicar.
"You should not do such things, you know. But go on, please."
He came to the glimpse of the angel from the gate.
"In the full glare," said the doctor, in parentheses, "it was 79 in the shade."
When the vicar had finished, the doctor pressed his lips together, tighter than ever, smiled faintly, and looked significantly into the vicar's eyes. "You don't—" began the vicar, falteringly. The doctor shook his head.
"Forgive me," he said,
putting his hand on the vicar's arm.
"You go out," he said, "on a hot lunch and on a hot afternoon, probably over 80. Your mind, what there is of it, is whirling with avian expectations. I say what there is of it,
because most of your nervous energy is down there, digesting your dinner. The man who has been lying in the bracken stands up before you, and you blaze away. Over he goes, and as it happens, he has reduplicate forelimbs, one pair being not unlike wings. It's a coincidence, certainly. And as for his iridescent colours and so forth, have you never had patches of colour swim before your eyes before, on a brilliant sunlit day? Are you sure they were confined to the wings? Think.
But he says he is an angel, said the vicar,
staring out of his little round eyes, his plump hands in his pockets. Ah, said the doctor, with his eye on the vicar. I expected as much. He paused.
But don't you think,
began the vicar. That man, said the doctor in a low, earnest voice, is a matoid.
A what?
Said the vicar. A matoid, an abnormal man. Did you notice the effeminate delicacy of his face, his tendency to quite unmeaning laughter, his neglected hair? Then consider his singular dress. The vicar's hand went up to his chin. Marks of mental weakness, said the doctor. Many of this type of degenerate show this same disposition to assume some vast mysterious credentials. One will call himself the Prince of Wales, another the Archangel Gabriel, another the deity, even. Ibsen thinks he is a great teacher, and Maeterlinck can use Shakespeare. I've just been reading all about it, in Nordau. No doubt his odd deformity gave him an idea.
But really,
began the vicar. No doubt he slipped away from confinement.
I do not altogether accept.
You will. If not, there's the police, and failing that, advertisement. But, of course, his people may want to hush it up. It's a sad thing in a family.
He seems so altogether.
Probably you'll hear from his friends in a day or so, said the doctor, feeling for his watch. He can't live far from here, I should think. He seems harmless enough. I must come along and see that wing again tomorrow. He slid off the hall table and stood up. Those old wives' tales still have their hold on you, he said, patting the vicar on the shoulder. But an angel, you know.
I certainly did think,
said the vicar dubiously. Weigh the evidence, said the doctor, still fumbling at his watch. Weigh the evidence with our instruments of precision. What does it leave you? Splashes of colour, spots of fancy, muscae volentes.
And yet, said the vicar, I could almost swear to the glory on his wings.
Think it over, said the doctor. Watch out. Hot afternoon, brilliant sunshine, boiling down on your head. But really, I must be going. It is 5:15. I'll see your angel tomorrow again, if no one has been to fetch him in the meanwhile. Your bandaging was really very good. I flatter myself on that score. Our ambulance classes were a success, you see. Good afternoon. The Curate. 15. The vicar opened the door half mechanically to let out Crump, and saw Mendham, his curate, coming up the pathway by the hedge of purple vetch and meadowsweet. At that his hand went up to his chin, and his eyes grew perplexed. Suppose he was deceived? The doctor passed the curate with a sweep of his hand from his hat brim. Crump was an extraordinarily clever fellow, the vicar thought, and knew far more of anyone's brain than one did oneself. The vicar felt that, so acutely. It made the coming explanation difficult. Suppose he were to go back into the drawing room and find just a tramp asleep on the hearthrug. Mendham was a cadaverous man with a magnificent beard. He looked, indeed, as though he had run to beard as a mustard plant does to seed. But when he spoke, you found he had a voice as well.
"My wife came home in a dreadful state," he brayed out at long range. "Come in," said the vicar. "Come in. A most remarkable occurrence. Please come in. Come into the study. I'm really dreadfully sorry, but when I explain—"
"And apologise, I hope," brayed the curate.
"And apologise. No, not that way. This way. The study."
"Now, what was that woman?" said the curate, turning on the vicar as the latter closed the study door.
"What woman? Pah! But really—"
"The painted creature in light attire, disgustingly light attire, to speak freely, with whom you were promenading the garden."
"My dear Mendham, that was an angel."
"A very pretty angel."
"The world is getting so matter-of-fact," said the vicar.
"The world," roared the curate, "grows blacker every day. But to find a man in your position, shamelessly, openly—"
"Bother," said the vicar aside. He rarely swore. "Look here, Mendham, you really misunderstand. I can assure you—"
"Very well," said the curate. "Explain." He stood with his lank legs apart, his arms folded, scowling at his vicar over his big beard. Explanations, I repeat. I have always considered the peculiar fallacy of this scientific age. The vicar looked about him helplessly. The world had all gone dull and dead. Had he been dreaming all the afternoon? Was there really an angel in the drawing room, or was he the sport of a complicated hallucination? "Well," said Mendham at the end of a minute. The vicar's hand fluttered about his chin.
"It's such a roundabout story," he said.
"No doubt it will be," said Mendham, harshly. The vicar restrained a movement of impatience.
"I went out to look for a strange bird this afternoon. Do you believe in angels, Mendham? Real angels?"
"I am not here to discuss theology. I am the husband of an insulted woman."
"But I tell you, it's not a figure of speech. This is an angel, a real angel with wings. He's in the next room now. You do misunderstand me. So, really, Hillier, it is true, I tell you, Mendham. I swear it is true."
The vicar's voice grew impassioned.
"What sin I have done that I should entertain and clothe angelic visitants, I don't know. I only know that, inconvenient as it undoubtedly will be, I have an angel now in the drawing-room, wearing my new suit and finishing his tea. And he's stopping with me, indefinitely, at my invitation. No doubt it was rash of me, but I can't turn him out, you know, because, Mrs. Mendham, I may be a weakling, but I am still a gentleman." "Really, Hillier?" "I can assure you it is true."
There was a note of hysterical desperation in the vicar's voice.
"I fired at him, taking him for a flamingo, and hit him in the wing."
"I thought this was a case for the bishop. I find it is a case for the lunacy commissioners."
"Come and see him, Mendham."
"But there are no angels."
"We teach the people differently," said the vicar.
"Not as material bodies," said the curate.
"Anyhow, come and see him."
"I don't want to see your hallucinations," began the curate. I can't explain anything unless you come and see him, said the vicar. A man who's more like an angel than anything else in heaven or earth. You simply must see if you wish to understand. I don't wish to understand, said the curate. I don't wish to lend myself to any imposture. Surely, Hillier, if this is not an imposition, you can tell me yourself. Flamingo, indeed. 16. The angel had finished his tea and was standing, looking pensively out of the window. He thought the old church down the valley, lit by the light of the setting sun, was very beautiful, but he could not understand the serried ranks of tombstones that lay up the hillside beyond. He turned as Mendham and the vicar came in. Now Mendham could bully his vicar cheerfully enough, just as he could bully his congregation, but he was not the sort of man to bully a stranger. He looked at the angel, and the strange woman theory was disposed of. The angel's beauty was too clearly the beauty of the youth. Mr. Hillier tells me, Mendham began, in an almost apologetic tone, that you... it's so curious. Claim to be an angel. Ah, an angel, said the vicar. The angel bowed. Naturally, said Mendham, we are curious. Very, said the angel. The blackness and the shape. I beg your pardon, said Mendham. The blackness and the flaps, repeated the angel. And no wings. Precisely, said Mendham, who was altogether at a loss. We are, of course, curious to know something of how you came into the village in such a peculiar costume. The angel looked at the vicar. The vicar touched his chin. You see, began the vicar. Let him explain, said Mendham. I beg. I wanted to suggest, began the vicar. And I don't want you to suggest. Bother, said the vicar. The angel looked from one to the other. Such rugose expressions flit across your faces, he said. You see, Mr. I don't know your name, said Mendham, with a certain diminution of suavity. The case stands thus. My wife, 4 ladies, I might say, are playing lawn tennis, when you suddenly rush out on them, sir. You rush out on them from among the rhododendra in a very defective costume. You and Mr. Hillier. But said the vicar. I know. It was this gentleman's costume was defective. Naturally, it is my place, in fact, to demand an explanation. His voice was growing in volume. And I must demand an explanation. The angel smiled faintly at his note of anger and his sudden attitude of determination, arms tightly folded. I am rather new to the world, the angel began. 19 at least, said Mendham. Old enough to know better. That's a poor excuse. May I ask one question first? Said the angel. Well? Do you think I am a man, like yourself, as the checkered man did? If you are not a man... One other question. Have you never heard of an angel? I warn you not to try that story upon me, said Mendham, now back at his familiar crescendo. The vicar interrupted. But, Mendham, his wings... Please let me talk to him, said Mendham. You are so quaint, said the angel. You interrupt everything I have to say. But what have you to say? Said Mendham. That I really am an angel. Pshaw! There you go. But tell me, honestly, how you came to be in the shrubbery of Siddermorton Vicarage, in the state in which you were, and in the vicar's company. Cannot you abandon this ridiculous story of yours?" The angel shrugged his wings. "What is the matter with this man?" he said to the vicar.
"My dear Mendham," said the vicar, "a few words from me. Surely my question is straightforward enough."
"But you won't tell me the answer you want, and it's no good my telling you any other."
"Pshaw," said the curate again,
and then, turning suddenly on the vicar, "Where does he come from?" The vicar was in a dreadful state of doubt by this time.
"He says he is an angel," said the vicar. "Why don't you listen to him?
No angel would alarm 4 ladies." "Is that what it is all about?" said the angel.
"Enough cause, too, I should think," said the curate.
"But I really did not know," said the angel.
"This is altogether too much."
"I am sincerely sorry I alarmed these ladies."
"You ought to be, but I see I shall get nothing out of you two."
Mendham went towards the door.
"I am convinced there is something discreditable at the bottom of this business, or why not tell a simple, straightforward story? I will confess you puzzle me. Why, in this enlightened age, you should tell this fantastic, this far-fetched story of an angel altogether beats me. What good can it do?" "But stop and look at his wings," said the vicar. "I can assure you he has wings."
Mendham had his fingers on the door handle.
"I have seen quite enough," he said. "It may be this is simply a foolish attempt at a hoax, Hillier." "But Mendham," said the vicar.
The curate halted in the doorway and looked at the vicar over his shoulder. The accumulating judgment of months found vent.
"I cannot understand, Hillier, why you are in the church. For the life of me, I cannot. The air is full of social movements, of economic change, the woman movement, rational dress, the reunion of Christendom, socialism, individualism, all the great and moving questions of the hour. Surely we, who follow the great reformer. And here you are stuffing birds and startling ladies with your callous disregard." "But Mendham," began the vicar.
The curate would not hear him.
"You shame the apostles with your levity. But this is only a preliminary inquiry," he said,
with a threatening note in his sonorous voice, and so vanished abruptly, with a violent slam, from the room. 17. "Are all men so odd as this?" said the angel.
"I'm in such a difficult position," said the vicar. "You see," he said,
and stopped, searching his chin for an idea. "I'm beginning to see," said the angel.
"They won't believe it."
"I see that."
"They will think I tell lies."
"And?"
"That will be extremely painful to me."
"Painful? Pain?" said the angel. "I hope not." The vicar shook his head. The good report of the village had been the breath of his life so far.
"You see," he said, "it would look so much more plausible if you said you were just a man."
"But I'm not," said the angel.
"No, you're not," said the vicar. "So that's no good. Nobody here, you know, has ever seen an angel, or heard of one, except in church. If you had made your debut in the chancel on Sunday, it might have been different, but that's too late now. Bother. Nobody, absolutely nobody, will believe in you."
"I hope I'm not inconveniencing you."
"Not at all," said the vicar. "Not at all. Only Naturally, it may be inconvenient if you tell a too incredible story. If I might suggest,
Well?
You see, people in the world, being men themselves, will almost certainly regard you as a man. If you say you are not, they will simply say you do not tell the truth. Only exceptional people appreciate the exceptional. When in Rome, one must, well, respect Roman prejudices a little. Talk Latin. You will find it better.
You propose I should feign to become a man?
You have my meaning at once.
The angel stared at the vicar's hollyhocks and thought. Possibly, after all, he said slowly, I shall become a man. I may have been too hasty in saying I was not. You say there are no angels in this world. Who am I to set myself up against your experience? A mere thing of a day, so far as this world goes. If you say there are no angels, clearly I must be something else. I eat. Angels do not eat. I may be a man already.
A convenient view, at any rate, said the vicar.
If it is convenient to you.
It is. And then, to account for your presence here. If, said the vicar, after a hesitating moment of reflection, if, for instance, you had been an ordinary man with a weakness for wading, and you had gone wading in the Sidder, and your clothes had been stolen, for instance, and I had come upon you in that position of inconvenience. The explanation I shall have to make to Mrs. Mendham would be shorn at least of the supernatural element. There is such a feeling against the supernatural element nowadays, even in the pulpit. You would hardly believe.
It's a pity that was not the case, said the angel.
Of course, said the vicar. It is a great pity that was not the case. But at any rate, you will oblige me if you do not obtrude your angelic nature. You will oblige everyone, in fact. There is a settled opinion that angels do not do this kind of thing, and nothing is more painful, as I can testify, than a decaying settled opinion. Settled opinions are mental teeth, in more ways than one. For my own part—"
The vicar's hand passed over his eyes for a moment.
"I cannot but believe you are an angel. Surely I can believe my own eyes."
"We always do ours," said the angel.
"And so do we, within limits."
Then the clock upon the mantel chimed 7, and almost simultaneously Mrs. Hinniger announced dinner. After dinner. 18. The angel and the vicar sat at dinner. The vicar, with his napkin tucked in at his neck, watched the angel struggling with his soup.
"You will soon get into the way of it,"
said the vicar. The knife and fork business was done awkwardly but with effect. The angel looked furtively at Delia, the little waiting maid. When presently they sat cracking nuts, which the angel found congenial enough, and the girl had gone, the angel asked, "Was that a lady too?"
"Well,"
said the vicar. Crack.
"No, she is not a lady. She is a servant."
"Yes," said the angel. "She had rather a nicer shape."
"You mustn't tell Mrs. Mendham that," said the vicar, covertly satisfied.
"She didn't stick out so much at the shoulders and hips, and there was more of her in between, and the colour of her robes was not discordant, simply neutral. And her face. Mrs. Mendham and her daughters had been playing tennis, said the vicar, feeling he ought not to listen to detraction, even of his mortal enemy. Do you like these things? These nuts? Very much, said the angel. Crack. You see, said the vicar, chum, 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 for my own part, I entirely believe you are an angel. Yes, said the angel. I shot you. I saw you flutter. It's beyond dispute. In my own mind, I admit it's curious and against my preconceptions, but practically, I'm assured, perfectly assured, in fact, that I saw what I certainly did see. But after the behaviour of these people, crack, I really don't see how we are to persuade people. Nowadays, people are so very particular about evidence, so that I think there is a great deal to be said for the attitude you assume. Temporarily, at least, I think it would be best of you to do as you propose to do, and behave as a man as far as possible. Of course, there is no knowing how or when you may go back. After what has happened, gluck, 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 as the vicar refills his glass. After what has happened, I should not be surprised to see the side of the room fall away, and the hosts of heaven appear to take you away again. Take us both away, even. You have so far enlarged my imagination. All these years I have been forgetting Wonderland. But still, it will certainly be wiser to break the thing gently to them. This life of yours, said the angel. I'm still in the dark about it. How do you begin? Dear me, said the vicar. Fancy having to explain that. We begin existence here, you know, as babies. Silly, pink, helpless things wrapped in white, with goggling eyes, that yelp dismally at the font. Then these babies grow larger, and become even beautiful when their faces are washed, and they continue to grow to a certain size. They become children, boys and girls, youths and maidens. Crack. Young men and young women. That is the finest time in life, according to many. Certainly the most beautiful, full of great hopes and dreams, vague emotions and unexpected dangers. That was a maiden, said the angel, indicating the door through which Delia had disappeared. Yes, said the vicar. That was a maiden. Then paused thoughtfully. And then? Then, said the vicar, the glamour fades and life begins in earnest. The young men and young women pair off, most of them. They come to me, shy and bashful, in smart, ugly dresses, and I marry them. And then little pink babies come to them, and some of the youths and maidens that were grow fat and vulgar, and some grow thin and shrewish, and their pretty complexions go, and they get a queer delusion of superiority over the younger people, and all the delight and glory goes out of their lives. So they call the delight and glory of the younger ones illusion. And then they begin to drop to pieces. Drop to pieces, said the angel. How grotesque. The hair comes off and gets dull-coloured or ashen grey, said the vicar. I, for instance. He bowed his head forward to show a circular shining patch the size of a florin. And their teeth come out. Their faces collapse and become as wrinkled and dry as a shrivelled apple. Corrugated, you called mine. They care more and more for what they have to eat and to drink, and less for any of the other delights of life. Their limbs get loose in the joints, and their hearts slack, or little pieces from their lungs come coughing up. Pain.
Ah, said the angel.
Pain comes into their lives more and more, and then they go. They do not like to go, but they have to. Out of this world, very reluctantly, clutching its pain at last in their eagerness to stop.
Where do they go?
Once I thought I knew, but now I am older I know I do not know. We have a legend. Perhaps it is not a legend. One may be a churchman and disbelieve. Stokes says there is nothing in it.
The vicar shook his head at the bananas. And you? Said the angel. Were you a little pink baby?
A little while ago I was a little pink baby.
Were you robed then as you are now?
No, dear me. What a queer idea. Had long white clothes, I suppose, like the rest of them.
And then you were a little boy?
A little boy.
And then a glorious youth?
I was not a very glorious youth, I am afraid. I was sickly and too poor to be radiant, and with a timid heart. I studied hard and pored over the dying thoughts of men long dead. So I lost the glory, and no maiden came to me, and the dullness of life began too soon.
And you have your little pink babies?
None,
said the vicar, with a scarce perceptible pause.
Yet all the same, as you see, I am beginning to drop to pieces. Presently my back will droop like a wilting flower stalk, and then, in a few thousand days more, I shall be done with, and I shall go out of this world of mine, whither I do not know.
And you have to eat like this, every day?
Eat, and get clothes, and keep this roof above me. There are some very disagreeable things in this world called cold and rain. And the other people here, how and why is too long a story, have made me a kind of chorus to their lives. They bring their little pink babies to me, and I have to say a name and some other things over each new pink baby. And when the children have grown to be youths and maidens, they come again and are confirmed. You will understand that better later. Then, before they may join in couples and have pink babies of their own, they must come again and hear me read out of a book. They would be outcast, and no other maiden would speak to the maiden who had a little pink baby without I had read over her for 20 minutes out of my book. It's a necessary thing, as you will see. Odd as it may seem to you. And afterwards, when they are falling to pieces, I try and persuade them of a strange world in which I scarcely believe myself, where life is altogether different from what they have had, or desire. And in the end, I bury them, and read out of my book to those who will presently follow into the unknown land. I stand at the beginning, and at the zenith, and at the setting of their lives, and on every 7th day, I who am a man myself, I who see no further than they do, talk to them of the life to come, the life of which we know nothing, if such a life there be. And slowly I drop to pieces amidst my prophesying.
What a strange life, said the angel.
Yes, said the vicar. What a strange life. But the thing that makes it strange to me is new. I had taken it as a matter of course until you came into my life. "This life of ours is so insistent," said the vicar. "It and its petty needs, its temporary pleasures," crack, "swathe our souls about. While I am preaching to these people of mine, of another life, some are ministering to one appetite and eating sweets. Others, the old men, are slumbering. The youths glance at the maidens. The grown men protrude white waistcoats and gold chains, pomp and vanity on a substratum of carnal substance. Their wives flaunt garish bonnets at one another. And I go on droning away of the things unseen and unrealized. Eye hath not seen. I read, nor ear heard, nor hath it entered into the imagination of man to conceive. And I look up to catch an adult male, immortal, admiring the fit of a pair of 3 and 6-penny gloves. It is damping, year after year. When I was ailing in my youth, I felt almost the assurance of vision that beneath this temporary phantasm world was the real world, the enduring world of the life everlasting. But now—" He glanced at his chubby white hand, fingering the stem of his glass. "I have put on flesh since then," he said. Pause. "I have changed and developed very much. The battle of the flesh and spirit does not trouble me as it did. Every day I feel less confidence in my beliefs, and more in God. I live, I am afraid, a quiescent life, duties fairly done, a little ornithology and a little chess, a trifle of mathematical trifling. My times are in his hands." The vicar sighed and became pensive. The angel watched him, and the angel's eyes were troubled with the puzzle of him. Gluck, gluck, gluck went the decanter, as the vicar refilled his glass. 19. So the angel dined, and talked to the vicar. Then presently the night came, and he was overtaken by yawning. "Oh," said the angel suddenly. "Dear me! A higher power seemed suddenly to stretch my mouth open, and a great breath of air went rushing down my throat." "You yawned," said the vicar. "Do you never yawn in the angelic country?" "Never," said the angel. "And yet you are immortal. I suppose you want to go to bed." "Bed?" said the angel. "Where's that?" So the vicar explained darkness to him, and the art of going to bed. The angels, it seems, sleep only in order to dream, and dream, like primitive man, with their foreheads on their knees, and they sleep among the white poppy meadows in the heat of the day. The angel found the bedroom arrangements quaint enough. "Why is everything raised up on big wooden legs?" he said. "You have the floor, and then you put everything you have upon a wooden quadruped. Why do you do it?" The vicar explained with philosophical vagueness. The angel burnt his finger in the candle flame and displayed an absolute ignorance of the elementary principles of combustion. He was merely charmed when a line of fire ran up the curtains. The vicar had to deliver a lecture on fire so soon as the flame was extinguished. He had all kinds of explanations to make. Even the soap needed explaining. It was an hour or more before the angel was safely tucked in for the night. "He's very beautiful," said the vicar, descending the staircase, quite tired out. "And he's a real angel, no doubt. But I'm afraid he will be a dreadful anxiety, all the same, before he gets into our earthly way with things." He seemed quite worried. He helped himself to an extra glass of sherry before he put away the wine in the cellaret. 20. The curate stood in front of the looking-glass and solemnly divested himself of his collar.
"I never heard a more fantastic story," said Mrs. Mendham from the basket chair. "The man must be mad. Are you sure?" "Perfectly, my dear. I've told you every word, every incident." "Well," said Mrs. Mendham, and spread her hands, "there's no sense in it." "Precisely, my dear." "The vicar," said Mrs. Mendham, "must be mad."
This hunchback is certainly one of the strangest creatures I have seen for a long time. Foreign-looking, with a big, bright-coloured face and long brown hair. It can't have been cut for months. The curate put his studs carefully upon the shelf of the dressing-table. And a kind of staring look about his eyes, and a simpering smile. Quite a silly-looking person. Effeminate.
"But who can he be?" said Mrs. Mendham. "I can't imagine, my dear, nor where he came from. He might be a chorister or something of that sort." "But why should he be about the shrubbery, in that dreadful costume?" "I don't know. The vicar gave me no explanation. He simply said, 'Mendham, this is an angel.'" "I wonder if he drinks." "Well, they may have been bathing near the spring, of course," reflected Mrs. Mendham. "But I noticed no other clothes on his arm."
The curate sat down on his bed and unlaced his boots.
"It's a perfect mystery to me, my dear."
Flick, flick of laces.
"Hallucination is the only charitable—" "You are sure, George, that it was not a woman?"
"Perfectly," said the curate.
"I know what men are, of course." "It was a young man of 19 or 20, said the curate. "I can't understand it," said Mrs. Mendham. "You say the creature is staying at the vicarage?"
"Hillier is simply mad," said the curate. He got up and went padding round the room to the door and put out his boots. "To judge by his manner, you would really think he believed this cripple was an angel. Your shoes out, dear."
"They're just by the wardrobe," said Mrs. Mendham. "He always was a little queer, you know. There was always something childish about him. An angel."
The curate came and stood by the fire, fumbling with his braces. Mrs. Mendham liked a fire, even in the summer. "He shirks all the serious problems in life, and is always trifling with some new foolishness," said the curate.
"Angel indeed," he laughed suddenly. "Hillier must be mad," he said.
Mrs. Mendham laughed too.
"Even that doesn't explain the hunchback," she said.
"The hunchback must be mad too," said the curate.
"It's the only way of explaining it in a sensible way," said Mrs. Mendham.
Pause.
"Angel or no angel," said Mrs. Mendham, "I know what is due to me. Even supposing the man thought he was in the company of an angel, well, that is no reason why he should not behave like a gentleman."
"That is perfectly true."
"You will write to the bishop, of course."
Mendham coughed.
"No, I shan't write to the bishop," said Mendham.
"I think it seems a little disloyal. And he took no notice of the last, you know."
"But surely—"
"I shall write to Austin, in confidence. He will be sure to tell the bishop, you know. And you must remember, my dear—"
"That Hillier can dismiss you, you were going to say. My dear, the man's much too weak. I should have a word to say about that. And besides, you do all his work for him. Practically, we manage the parish from end to end. I do not know what would become of the poor if it was not for me. They'd have free quarters in the vicarage tomorrow. There is that Goody Ansell."
"I know, my dear," said the curate, turning away and proceeding with his undressing. You were telling me about her only this afternoon. 21. And thus, in the little bedroom over the gable, we reach a first resting place in this story. And as we have been hard at it, getting our story spread out before you, it may be perhaps well to recapitulate a little. Looking back, you will see that much has been done. We began with a blaze of light, not uniform, but broken all over by curving flashes, like the waving of swords, and the sound of a mighty harping, and the advent of an angel with polychromatic wings. Swiftly, dexterously, as the reader must admit, wings have been clipped, halo handled off, the glory clapped into coat and trousers, and the angel made, for all practical purposes, a man, under a suspicion of being either a lunatic or an impostor. You have heard too, or at least been able to judge, what the vicar and the doctor and the curate's wife thought of the strange arrival. And further remarkable opinions are to follow. The afterglow of the summer sunset in the northwest darkens into night, and the angel sleeps, dreaming himself back in the wonderful world where it is always light, and everyone is happy, where fire does not burn and ice does not chill, where rivulets of starlight go streaming through the amaranthine meadows, out to the seas of peace. He dreams, and it seems to him that once more his wings glow with 1,000 colours and flash through the crystal air of the world from which he has come. So he dreams, but the vicar lies awake, too perplexed for dreaming. Chiefly he is troubled by the possibilities of Mrs. Mendham, but the evening's talk has opened strange vistas in his mind, and he is stimulated by a sense as of something seen darkly by the indistinct vision of a hitherto unsuspected wonderland lying about his world. For 20 years now, he has held his village living, and lived his daily life protected by his familiar creed, by the clamour of the details of life, from any mystical dreaming. But now, interweaving with the familiar bother of his persecuting neighbour, is an altogether unfamiliar sense of strange, new things. There was something ominous in the feeling. Once, indeed, it rose above all other considerations, and in a kind of terror he blundered out of bed, bruised his shins very convincingly, found the matches at last, and lit a candle to assure himself of the reality of his own customary world again. But on the whole, the more tangible trouble was the Mendham avalanche. Her tongue seemed to be hanging above him like the sword of Damocles. What might she not say of this business before her indignant imagination came to rest? And while the successful captor of the strange bird was sleeping thus uneasily, Golly of Sidderton was carefully unloading his gun after a wearisome blank day, and Sandy Bright was on his knees in prayer, with the window carefully fastened. Annie Durgan was sleeping hard with her mouth open, and Amori's mother was dreaming of washing, and both of them had long since exhausted the topics of the sound and the glare. Lumpy Durgan was sitting up in his bed, now crooning the fragment of a tune, and now listening intently for a sound he had heard once and longed to hear again. As for the solicitor's clerk at Ipping Hanger, he was trying to write poetry about a confectioner's girl at Port Burdock, and the strange bird was quite out of his head. But the ploughman, who had seen it on the confines of Siddermorton Park, had a black eye. That had been one of the more tangible consequences of a little argument about birds' legs in The Ship. It is worthy of this passing mention, since it is probably the only known instance of an angel causing anything of the kind. Morning. 22. The vicar, going to call the angel, found him dressed and leaning out of his window. It was a glorious morning, still dewy, and the rising sunlight slanting round the corner of the house struck warm and yellow upon the hillside. The birds were astir in the hedges and shrubbery, Up the hillside, for it was late in August, a plough drove slowly. The angel's chin rested upon his hands, and he did not turn as the vicar came up to him. "How's the wing?" said the vicar. "I'd forgotten it," said the angel. "Is that yonder a man?" The vicar looked.
"That's a ploughman."
"Why does he go to and fro like that? Does it amuse him?"
"He's ploughing. That's his work."
"Work? Why does he do it? It seems a monotonous thing to do."
"It is," admitted the vicar. "But he has to do it to get a living, you know. To get food to eat and all that kind of thing."
"How curious," said the angel. "Do all men have to do that? Do you?"
No, he does it for me. Does my share."
"Why?" asked the angel.
"Oh, in return for things I do for him, you know. We go in for division of labour in this world. Exchange is no robbery."
"I see," said the angel, with his eyes still on the ploughman's heavy movements. "What do you do for him?"
"That seems an easy question to you," said the vicar. "But really, it's difficult. Our social arrangements are rather complicated. It's impossible to explain these things all at once, before breakfast. Don't you feel hungry?"
"I think I do," said the angel, slowly, still at the window, and then abruptly, "Somehow I can't help thinking that ploughing must be far from enjoyable."
"Possibly," said the vicar. "Very possibly. But breakfast is ready. Won't you come down?"
The angel left the window reluctantly.
"Our society," explained the vicar on the staircase, "is a complicated organisation."
"Yes?"
"And it is so arranged that some do one thing and some another."
"And that lean, bent old man trudges after that heavy blade of iron, pulled by a couple of horses, while we go down to eat."
"Yes. You will find it is perfectly just. Ah, mushrooms and poached eggs. It's the social system. Pray, be seated. Possibly it strikes you as unfair?"
"I'm puzzled," said the angel.
"The drink I'm sending you is called coffee," said the vicar. "I dare say you are. When I was a young man, I was puzzled in the same way. But afterwards comes a broader view of things. These black things are called mushrooms. They look beautiful. Other considerations. All men are brothers, of course, but some are younger brothers, so to speak. There is work that requires culture and refinement, and work in which culture and refinement would be an impediment. And the rights of property must not be forgotten. One must render unto Caesar. Do you know, instead of explaining this matter now, this is yours. I think I will lend you a little book to read. Chum, chum, chum. Oh, these mushrooms are well up to their appearance, which sets the whole thing out very clearly."
The violin. 23. After breakfast, the vicar went into the little room next to his study to find a book on political economy for the angel to read. For the angel's social ignorances were clearly beyond any verbal explanations. The door stood ajar. "What is that?" said the angel, following him. "A violin." He took it down.
"You play?"
said the vicar. The angel had the bow in his hand, and by way of answer drove it across the strings. The quality of the note made the vicar turn suddenly. The angel's hand tightened on the instrument. The bow flew back and flickered, and an air the vicar had never heard before danced in his ears. The angel shifted the fiddle under his dainty chin and went on playing, and as he played, his eyes grew bright and his lips smiled. At first, he looked at the vicar. Then his expression became abstracted. He seemed no longer to look at the vicar, but through him, at something beyond, something in his memory or his imagination, something infinitely remote, undreamt of hitherto. The vicar tried to follow the music. The air reminded him of a flame. It rushed up, shone, flickered and danced, passed and reappeared. No, it did not reappear. Another air, like it and unlike it, shot up after it, wavered, vanished. Then another, the same and not the same. It reminded him of the flaring tongues that palpitate and change above a newly lit fire. There are two airs, or motifs. Which is it? Thought the vicar. He knew remarkably little of musical technique. They go dancing up, one pursuing the other, out of the fire of the incantation, pursuing, fluctuating, turning up into the sky. There below was the fire burning, a flame without fuel upon a level space, and there two flirting butterflies of sound, dancing away from it, up, one over another, swift, abrupt, uncertain. Flirting butterflies, were they? What was the vicar thinking of? Where was he? In the little room next to his study, of course, and the angel standing in front of him, smiling into his face, playing the violin and looking through him as though he was only a window. That motif again, a yellow flare, spread fan-like by a gust, and now one, then, with a swift eddying upward flight, the other. The two things of fire and light pursuing one another again up into that clear immensity. The study and the realities of life suddenly faded out of the vicar's eyes, grew thinner and thinner like a mist that dissolves into air, and he and the angel stood together on a pinnacle of wrought music, about which glittering melodies circled and vanished and reappeared. He was in the land of beauty, and once more the glory of heaven was upon the angel's face, and the glowing delights of colour pulsated in his wings. Himself the vicar could not see, but I cannot tell you of the vision of that great and spacious land, of its incredible openness and height and nobility. For there is no space there like ours, no time as we know it. One must needs speak by bungling metaphors, and own in bitterness after all that one has failed. And it was only a vision. The wonderful creatures flying through the aether saw them not as they stood there, flew through them as one might pass through a wisp of mist. The vicar lost all sense of duration, all sense of necessity. "Ah," said the angel, suddenly putting down the fiddle. The vicar had forgotten the book on political economy, had forgotten everything until the angel had done. For a minute he sat quite still. Then he woke up with a start. He was sitting on the old iron-bound chest. "Really," he said, slowly. "You are very clever." He looked about him in a puzzled way. "I had a kind of vision while you were playing. I seemed to see... What did I see? It is gone." He stood up with a dazzled expression upon his face. "I shall never play the violin again," he said. "I wish you would take it to your room and keep it, and play to me again. I did not know anything of music until I heard you play. I do not feel as though I had ever heard any music before." He stared at the angel, then about him at the room. "I have never felt anything of this kind with music before," he said. He shook his head. "I shall never play again." The angel explores the village. 24. Very unwisely, as I think, the vicar allowed the angel to go down into the village by himself, to enlarge his ideas of humanity. Unwisely, because how was he to imagine the reception the angel would receive? Not thoughtlessly, I am afraid. He had always carried himself with decorum in the village, and the idea of a slow procession through the little street with all the inevitable curious remarks, explanations, pointings, was too much for him. The angel might do the strangest things. The village was certain to think them. Peering faces. Who's he got now? Besides, was it not his duty to prepare his sermon in good time? The angel, duly directed, went down cheerfully by himself, still innocent of most of the peculiarities of the human, as distinguished from the angelic turn of mind. The angel walked slowly, his white hands folded behind his hunched back, his sweet face looking this way and that. He peered curiously into the eyes of the people he met. A little child picking a bunch of vetch and honeysuckle looked in his face, and forthwith came and put them in his hand. It was about the only kindness he had from a human being, saving only the vicar and one other. He heard Mother Gustick scolding that granddaughter of hers as he passed the door. "You brazen faggot, you," said Mother Gustick. "You trumpery baggage." The angel stopped, startled at the strange sounds of Mother Gustick's voice. "Put your best clothes on and your feather in your hat, and off you goes to meetin', fell-all, and me at home slaving for you. 'Tis a fancy lady you'll be wanting to be, my gal, a walking touch and go with your idleness and finery." The voice ceased abruptly, and a great peace came upon the battered air. "Most grotesque and strange," said the angel, still surveying this wonderful box of discords. "Walking touch and go." He did not know that Mrs. Gustick had suddenly become aware of his existence and was scrutinizing his appearance through the window blind. Abruptly, the door flew open, and she stared out into the angel's face. A strange apparition. Grey and dusty hair, and the dirty pink dress unhooked to show the stringy throat. A discoloured gargoyle, presently to begin spouting incomprehensible abuse. "Now then, mister," began Mrs. Gustick, "have you nothing better to do than listen at people's doors for what you can pick up?" The angel stared at her in astonishment. "Do you hear?" said Mrs. Gustick, evidently very angry indeed. "Listening?" "Have you any objection to my hearing?" "Object to my hearing? Course I have. What do you think? You ain't such a ninny." "But if you didn't want me to hear, why did you cry out so loud? I thought—" "You thought? Oh, softy, that's what you are. You silly, girt-staring gaby. What, don't know any better than to come holding your girt mouth wide open for all that you can catch hold on? And then off up there to tell, you great fat-faced, tail-bearing silly Billy. I'd be ashamed to come poking and peering round quiet people's houses." The angel was surprised to find that some inexplicable quality in her voice excited the most disagreeable sensations in him, and a strong desire to withdraw. But, resisting this, he stood listening politely, as the custom is in the angelic land, so long as anyone is speaking. The entire eruption was beyond his comprehension. He could not perceive any reason for the sudden projection of this vituperative head out of infinity, so to speak, and questions without a break for an answer were outside his experience altogether. Mrs. Gustick proceeded with her characteristic fluency, assured him he was no gentleman, inquired if he called himself one, remarked that every tramp did as much nowadays, compared him to a stuck pig, marvelled at his impudence, asked him if he wasn't ashamed of himself standing there, inquired if he was rooted to the ground, was curious to be told what he meant by it, wanted to know whether he robbed a scarecrow for his clothes, suggested that an abnormal vanity prompted his behaviour, inquired if his mother knew he was out, and finally remarking, "I got something'll move you, my gentleman," disappeared with a ferocious slamming of the door. The interval struck the angel as singularly peaceful. His whirling mind had time to analyse his sensations. He creased, bowing and smiling, and stood, merely astonished. "This is a curious, painful feeling," said the angel. "Almost worse than hungry, and quite different. When one is hungry, one wants to eat. I suppose she was a woman. Here, one wants to get away. I suppose I might just as well go." He turned slowly and went down the road, meditating. He heard the cottage door reopen, and turning his head, saw through intervening scarlet runners Mrs. Gustick with a steaming saucepan full of boiling cabbage water in her hand. "'Tis well you went, Mr. Stolen Breeches," came the voice of Mrs. Gustick floating down through the vermilion blossoms. "Don't you come peeping and prying round this here cottage again, or I'll learn your manners, I will." The angel stood in a state of considerable perplexity. He had no desire to come within earshot of the cottage again, ever. He did not understand the precise import of the black pot, but his general impression was entirely disagreeable. There was no explaining it. "I mean it," said Mrs. Gustick, crescendo. "Drat it, I mean it." The angel turned and went on, a dazzled look in his eyes. "She was very grotesque," said the angel. "Very. Much more than the little man in black. And she means it. But what she means I don't know." He became silent. "I suppose they all mean something," he said, presently, still perplexed. 25. Then the angel came in sight of the forge, where Sandy Bright's brother was shoeing a horse for the carter from Upmorton. Two hobbledehoys were standing by the forge, staring in a bovine way at the proceedings. As the angel approached these two, and then the carter turned slowly through an angle of 30 degrees and watched his approach, staring quietly and steadily at him. The expression on their faces was one of abstract interest. The angel became self-conscious for the first time in his life. He drew nearer, trying to maintain an amiable expression on his face, an expression that beat in vain against their granitic stare. His hands were behind him. He smiled pleasantly, looking curiously at the, to him, incomprehensible employment of the smith, but the battery of eyes seemed to angle for his regard. Trying to meet the three pairs at once, the angel lost his alertness and stumbled over a stone. One of the yokels gave a sarcastic cough, and was immediately covered with confusion at the angel's inquiring gaze, nudging his companion with his elbow to cover his disorder. None spoke, and the angel did not speak. So soon as the angel had passed, one of the three hummed this tune in an aggressive tone. Then all three of them laughed. One tried to sing something, and found his throat contained phlegm. The angel proceeded on his way. "Who's he, then?" said the second hobbledehoy. Ping, ping, ping went the blacksmith's hammer. "S'pose he's one of these here foreigners," said the carter from Upmorton. "Damn silly fool he do look, to be sure." "'Twas the way with them foreigners," said the first hobbledehoy, sagely. "Got something very like the ump," said the carter from Upmorton. "Damned if he ain't." Then the silence healed again, and they resumed their quiet, expressionless consideration of the angel's retreating figure. "Very like the ump, it is," said the carter, after an enormous pause.